They build machines that bleed radiation and hurl chunks of dead metal, the alien commander scoffed. A primitive, terrified species. He smiled as he ordered his invincible fleet into human space. 5 minutes later, 3,000 dreadnoughts were burning, and the commander finally understood why the galaxy feared the dark. Supreme Commander Zekel stood on the elevated command dais of the Time's obsidian crown, his hands clasped behind his back, his four amber eyes fixed on the holographic projection, rotating slowly in the center of the bridge. The projection displayed a small, unremarkable yellow dwarf star, orbited by a handful of planetary bodies. It was Sector 7G, a backwater coordinate in the outer fringes of the Orion Arm. To the native inhabitants, it was simply known as Sol. For the Volari Ascendancy, it was merely the next pebble to be crushed under the unstoppable treads of their cosmic empire. The Volari had spent the last 2 millennia subjugating the galaxy. They possessed technology that seemed indistinguishable from magic to lesser races. They had mastered dark energy conduits, harnessed the raw power of captured singularities to fuel their massive dreadnoughts, and possessed energy shielding capable of withstanding the fury of a dying sun. They were the apex predators of the Milky Way. They did not negotiate. They did not falter. They conquered. Sub-Prefect Zal, Zekal murmured, his voice a low, resonant purr that vibrated through the crystalline acoustics of the command deck. Refresh my memory regarding the indigenous population of the third planet. Xal, a slender Volari draped in the silver robes of the intelligence caste, stepped forward, his datapad glowing with a soft, ethereal blue light. They call themselves humans, Supreme Commander, a bipedal mammalian species. Technologically speaking, they are barely out of their own planetary cradle. They achieved primitive, faster-than-light travel only a mere century ago, utilizing crude spatial folding mechanics that are incredibly inefficient and prone to catastrophic failure. Zekal let out a short, clicking laugh. Spatial folding? How antiquated! Are they at least unified? Hardly, Zal replied, swiping a long, multi-jointed finger across his pad. The hologram shifted to display images of Earth's sprawling megalopolises, massive industrial complexes, and vast, scarred landscapes. They are deeply factionalized. Our interception of their communication networks reveals a species obsessed with internal conflict. We have cataloged their primary weapons manufacturing guilds, entities operating under monikers such as Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems, Northrop Grumman, and DARPA. They function as private entities, entirely separate from their central governments, profiting off their own species' perpetual paranoia. Fascinatingly primitive, Zekal mused, leaning forward. And their armaments? What do these guilds produce to defend their little blue sphere? Zal's expression contorted into the Volari equivalent of a smirk. That is perhaps the most amusing data point, Commander. They rely almost exclusively on kinetic and chemical weaponry. They use localized explosions to propel dense metallic slugs through a vacuum. Their most advanced naval vessels utilize magnetic rails to accelerate depleted uranium and tungsten. For close-quarters combat, they actually employ controlled nuclear fission. A murmur of genuine amusement rippled through the bridge crew. Nuclear fission? Kinetic slugs? The Volari had abandoned such barbaric concepts thousands of years ago. A Volari shield matrix could absorb kinetic impacts all day without dropping a single percentage point of integrity. They throw rocks, Zekal said, his voice dripping with aristocratic disdain. They split atoms and throw rocks. And this is the species that the High Council determined required a vanguard fleet of 3,000 ships to pacify? The Council is notoriously cautious, Commander, Zal said diplomatically. There was an incident 3 of their orbital cycles ago. A Volari scout ship encountered a human vessel near the edge of their system. The human ship did not flee. It broadcasted a continuous, high-intensity auditory signal, a sequence of prime numbers followed by a recorded message in dozens of languages, warning our scout to stay away. When our scout ignored the warning, the human ship deliberately overloaded its own primitive fission reactor and rammed our vessel. Zekel frowned, his amber eyes narrowing. A suicide tactic. The desperate act of a terrified animal cornered by a superior predator. Precisely my analysis, Zal agreed. They are volatile, aggressive, and highly irrational, but they pose zero tactical threat to a coordinated Volari strike force. Our dark matter lances will cut through their crude titanium hulls like water, and their railguns will harmlessly spark against our kinetic displacement shields. Zekal waved a hand, dismissing the holographic display of Earth. He was already bored with this conquest. There was no glory in stepping on an insect. Very well. Prepare the fleet for real space translation. We will bypass their outer system entirely and drop out of hyperspace just outside the gravity well of their largest gas giant. We will shatter whatever pathetic defense force they have assembled there, and then we will dictate the terms of their surrender from orbit. Translation sequence initiated. Supreme Commander, the navigation officer called out from the sunken control pit. Spatial conduits aligning, arriving in the Sol system in 3, 2, 1. The bridge windows, previously displaying the swirling vortex of hyperspace, flashed with blinding white light. When the light faded, the majestic, terrifying armada of the Volari Ascendancy floated in the cold void of human space. Before them, a massive, swirling orb of gas Jupiter dominated the visual spectrum, its violent storms painting the darkness with strokes of ochre, red, and cream. Zekel stood tall, adjusting his ceremonial cape. Sensors, paint the system. Let us see these rock throwers. Scanning now, Commander, the sensor officer replied. There was a brief pause, filled only by the low hum of the dreadnought's core. Then, the officer spoke again, confusion lacing his tone. Commander, I am detecting a human presence. But what? Zekel snapped. It is small, sir. Incredibly small. There is no armada waiting for us. There is only a single Terran vessel holding position directly in our flight path, approximately 10 million kilometers ahead. Zekal blinked. A single ship? Yes, Commander. It is broadcasting on an open, unencrypted subspace channel, audio only. They are requesting to speak with the fleet commander. Zekal's lips curled into a predatory smile. So they were coming to surrender before the battle even began. How predictably disappointing. Put them through. Let the entire bridge hear the sound of human submission. The audio channel cracked to life, filled with the faint, static hiss of background cosmic radiation. When the human voice finally spoke, it was not trembling with fear, nor was it laced with the frantic urgency of a species begging for its survival. It was calm, annoyingly, terrifyingly calm. It sounded like a man ordering a cup of coffee. Attention Volari Fleet. This is Admiral Richard Caldwell of the Terran Coalition Defense Force, commanding the vessel times UNS Thermopylae. You have executed an unauthorized jump into a restricted Terran security zone. Power down your weapon systems, disengage your translation drives, and prepare to be boarded for customs inspection, or you will be fired upon. You have 1 minute to comply. Silence descended upon the bridge of the Time's obsidian crown. For a moment, Zekel thought the translation matrix had malfunctioned. He looked at Subprefect Zal, who looked equally bewildered. Then Zekal threw his head back and let out a roaring, booming laugh. The bridge crew quickly joined in, a chorus of alien amusement echoing off the dark metal bulkheads. Fired upon? Zekal wheezed, wiping a tear from his lower left eye. By what? Sub-Prefect, is there some massive cloaked armada hiding behind the gas giant that our sensors have miraculously missed? Negative, Commander, Zal replied. A smug grin plastered across his face. Volari sensors cannot be fooled by human stealth technology. There is only the Times Thermopylae, a heavy cruiser class by their standards. Thick armor, minimal shielding, relying on standard chemical propulsion thrusters, and what appears to be 4 heavy magnetic railgun batteries. Zekal straightened his posture, clearing his throat. He keyed the communicator, ensuring his voice carried the full weight and majesty of the Ascendancy. Human vessel times Thermopylae. This is Supreme Commander Zekal of the Volari Empire. I must commend your bravery, Admiral Caldwell, though I pity your profound ignorance. Look upon your sensors. You are facing 3,000 of the most advanced warships ever constructed in the history of the cosmos. Your primitive kinetic toys do not scare me. We will take your world. We will enslave your people. And we will teach you the grace of subjugation. Stand down and your death will be swift. The static hummed for a few long seconds. 45 seconds, Zekal? Admiral Caldwell's voice replied, entirely unfazed. I strongly suggest you look at your own sensors a little closer. This is your final warning. Zekal's amusement evaporated, replaced by a flash of hot anger. The sheer audacity of this primate. End transmission, he barked. The comms channel cut out with a sharp chirp. Tactical. Lock onto that scrap heap and vaporize it. Navigation. Order the Vanguard to advance past the gas giant. We move on Earth. Target locked, Commander. Charging dark matter lances, the tactical officer announced. Outside the viewport, the massive Volari fleet began to move, their dark energy engines flaring with a haunting violet light. They surged forward, a tidal wave of indestructible metal and crackling energy shields, ready to wash over the solitary human cruiser. Zakal watched with grim satisfaction. Humans don't scare me, he thought to himself. They are arrogant, loud, and stupid. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. The Vanguard crossed the invisible threshold of Jupiter's magnetosphere. Commander, the sensor officer said, his voice suddenly sharp, I am detecting a massive energy spike. From the human cruiser? Zakal asked dismissively. No, sir. From everywhere. Suddenly, the bridge lights flickered. A low, ominous groan echoed through the hull of the Times obsidian crown. Then, the first alarm went off. It was a high-pitched, piercing wail that shattered the calm of the command deck. Before Zakal could even open his mouth to demand a report, a second alarm joined it, then a third. Within 5 seconds, every single console on the bridge was flashing a violent, strobing red. The cacophony of sirens was deafening. It sounded as though the ship itself was screaming. Report! Zakal roared over the noise, gripping the railing of his command dais to steady himself as the deck plates began to vibrate violently beneath his boots. Sir! Massive electromagnetic fluctuations detected across the entire fleet, Zal shouted, frantically tapping his datapad. Our localized sensors are being blinded. It's not a localized jamming field, it's the entire planet. What planet? Earth? No! The gas giant. Jupiter. Zal's eyes were wide, with a terror that Zekel had never seen before. Commander, the gas giant's magnetic field. It's weaponized. The humans didn't just build ships. They seeded the entire Jovian magnetosphere with trillions of autonomous, conductive nanoparticles. The moment we crossed the threshold, they triggered a cascading, resonant frequency. They've turned the planet's magnetic field into a directed, system-wide EMP. Impossible! Zekel snarled. Our shielding is designed to withstand a supernova. Our thermal shielding, yes, but this isn't thermal. It's a localized disruption of dark energy cohesion. Our warp drives are offline. Our targeting computers are offline. The fleet is completely blind. Zakal stared out the viewport. The majestic violet glow of his fleet's engines was sputtering, dying out like candles in a hurricane. 3,000 invincible warships were suddenly adrift in the dark, their most advanced systems rendered utterly useless by a trap so vast, so brutally simple, that Volari military doctrine didn't even have a word for it. Switch to manual optical targeting, Zakal commanded, his heart pounding in his chest. Fire the lances manually. Destroy that cruiser. Sir, we can't, the tactical officer cried out. The dark matter capacitors are bleeding energy into the hull. If we attempt to fire, we will cook ourselves alive. The communicator crackled to life on its own, overriding Zekel's command lock. Time's up, Admiral Caldwell's voice echoed through the chaotic, red-lit bridge. There was a dark, chilling finality in his tone. Project Damocles is now active. Welcome to the Sol system, Commander. Hope you brought an umbrella. Zekel looked out into the void. The Thermopylae Times hadn't moved an inch. It hadn't fired a single shot. Commander! The sensor officer screamed, his voice cracking. New contacts! Thousands of them! But they aren't ships! Then what are they? Zakal demanded. They're rocks, sir. The asteroid belt. The humans. They didn't build a defense fleet. They built railguns into the asteroids themselves. They are firing the belt at us. Zakal's blood ran cold as he realized the fatal flaw in his arrogance. Humans didn't rely on energy weapons because they were primitive. They relied on kinetic weapons because out here, in the dark, nothing beats the sheer, terrifying physics of mass, multiplied by velocity. To the Volari, warfare was an art form. It was a precise, elegant dance of energy manipulation, shield harmonics, and quantum probabilities. When Volari ships fought, the void of space was painted with brilliant hues of plasma, laser fire, and the rippling auroras of deflector shields, absorbing the heat of 1,000 suns. Humanity, however, viewed warfare through a much older, much darker lens. To a human, war wasn't an art. War was industrial logistics, mathematics, and the sheer, spiteful application of blunt force trauma. The Volari were about to learn the difference between an artist and a butcher. On the bridge of the Time's obsidian crown, the blaring alarms merged into a singular, unending screech of impending doom. Sub-Prefect Zal was desperately trying to reroute power through the analog auxiliary systems. His normally pristine silver robes, now stained with the coolant fluid leaking from the ceiling overhead. "Magnify optical sensors on the approaching contacts!" Zakal roared, his aristocratic poise completely shattered. "Show me what is coming!" The central hologram flickered, fighting through the massive electromagnetic interference tearing through the ship. When the image stabilized, Zekel's breath caught in his throat. They were literally rocks. But they weren't just floating space debris. They were massive slugs of dense, refined tungsten and iron, some the size of small buildings, others as long as Volari scout ships. But it wasn't the size that paralyzed Zakal with dread. It was the speed. The humans hadn't just strapped thrusters to asteroids. Utilizing Black Project technology funded by DARPA and engineered in the darkest depths of Lockheed Martin's orbital skunk works facilities, humanity had turned the entire asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter into a staggered array of colossal, stationary railguns. They had waited patiently for the Volari fleet to get caught in the gravitational pull of Jupiter, effectively anchoring the alien armada in a predictable choke point. And then they pulled the trigger. "Velocity?" Zakal whispered, his voice trembling. "Point 1, 2C, Commander," the sensor officer replied, sobbing openly. 12% the speed of light. Impact in 4 seconds. Zakal knew the physics. Every cadet in the Volari Naval Academy knew the physics. Energy shields were designed to dissipate heat and absorb plasma. They worked by diffusing the energy of an attack across the surface area of the shield bubble. But kinetic energy, pure, unadulterated mass moving at relativistic speeds, did not behave like plasma. At 12% the speed of light, a 10-ton rod of tungsten doesn't just hit a shield. It punches through the localized reality of the shield matrix, turning its own kinetic energy into a localized nuclear detonation upon impact, transferring all of that momentum directly into whatever unfortunate object was in its way. Brace for. Zakal didn't even get to finish the command. Outside the viewport, the void of space erupted into a meat grinder of apocalyptic proportions. There were no bright flashes of laser fire. There was no elegant duel of naval superiority. There was only the brutal, sickening reality of ultra-high-velocity kinetic impacts. The vanguard of the Volari fleet, consisting of 500 heavy destroyers, simply ceased to exist. When the first wave of relativistic kill vehicles hit, the Volari energy shields flared a brilliant, blinding white for a fraction of a microsecond before completely shattering like cheap glass. The tungsten slugs caved in the dark matter-armored hulls of the destroyers as easily as a bullet tearing through wet tissue paper. The sheer kinetic shockwave of the impacts turned the internal atmosphere of the Volari ships into superheated plasma, incinerating the crews instantly before the kinetic force ripped the ships entirely in half. Silent, violent explosions blossomed across the Volari formation as secondary dark matter core breaches tore the fleet apart from the inside. The Time's obsidian crown times lurched violently to the starboard side. Zekel was thrown off his feet, slamming hard against the tactical console. He tasted copper, his own blood. The indestructible flagship groaned, its titanium alloy skeleton screaming under the gravitational whiplash of a near miss. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 19. Zal screamed over the chaos. "Atmosphere venting! Commander, the Vanguard is gone! The entire front line is just gone!" Zakal dragged himself up to his knees, gripping the console. He looked out the viewport. The space between his fleet and Jupiter was no longer empty. It was filled with the glowing, expanding debris fields of his own invincible armada. But the nightmare wasn't over. "Second wave detected," the tactical officer yelled, his console sparking. "Tracking thousands of smaller contacts. Missiles." "They still use missiles," Zakal sputtered in disbelief. "Shoot them down! Deploy point defense lasers!" "Our tracking systems are still blinded by the EMP," Zal replied frantically. "We are firing blind, and Commander, the missiles aren't aiming for us." Zakal looked at the tactical readouts. Zal was right. The swarm of human missiles, launched from hidden silos across the moons of Jupiter and Mars, were bypassing the Volari fleet entirely. They were rocketing past the struggling alien ships and heading straight into the densest parts of the freshly created debris fields of the Volari vanguard. "What are they doing?" Zekel whispered. "Why fire into the wreckage?" 10 seconds later, the human missiles detonated. But they weren't explosive warheads. They were Kasaba howitzers, shaped nuclear charges designed to channel the fury of an atomic blast into a highly focused directional spear of superheated plasma and radiation. But the humans didn't aim the spears at the Volari ships. They aimed them at the massive, drifting chunks of Volari dark matter engines and armored hull plating left over from the first strike. The nuclear blast slammed into the debris, instantly vaporizing the metal and turning the wreckage of the Volari's own ships into a colossal, hyper-accelerated shotgun blast of shrapnel aimed directly at the surviving center of the Volari formation. "Kessler syndrome," Zal breathed, his eyes wide with absolute primal horror as he finally understood the human military doctrine. "They didn't build a defense fleet, Commander. They built a meat grinder. They use our own destroyed ships as ammunition against us." The wall of shrapnel, millions of jagged pieces of indestructible Volari armor, propelled by nuclear fire, slammed into the main body of the fleet. Without their kinetic shields, the Volari cruisers were defenseless. The shrapnel shredded the fleet, ships were visually flayed alive, communication arrays were sheared off, engines were punctured. The dark void of space was filled with the silent screams of 1,000 venting atmospheres. The Time's obsidian crown times took a direct hit from a piece of shrapnel the size of a city block. The sound of tearing metal was deafening. The entire bridge tilted 30 degrees as the ship's primary stabilizing thrusters were violently amputated. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, and the emergency bulkheads slammed shut to seal off the violently depressurizing lower decks. Zekel lay on the slanted deck, his pristine uniform soaked in blood and coolant fluid. His ears were ringing. His 4 eyes stared blankly at the chaotic ruin of his invincible armada. 3,000 ships, the pride of the Volari Ascendancy, the conquerors of 100 worlds. In less than 3 minutes, humanity had reduced them to a floating graveyard, and they hadn't even scratched the paint on the Time's UNS Thermopylae. The comms channel crackled to life once more, cutting through the wailing sirens. "Commander Zekel," Admiral Caldwell's voice drifted through the smoke-filled bridge, still possessing that same terrifyingly calm demeanor. "Your fleet is combat ineffective. Your engines are dead. You are bleeding atmosphere. I will not give you a third warning. Surrender your vessel, or I will authorize the Time's Thermopylae Times to open fire. And trust me, you don't want to see what our actual guns can do." Zekel closed his eyes. The arrogance, the pride, the millennia of Volari supremacy, it all burned away in the cold, unforgiving light of human ingenuity. Humans didn't fight to conquer. They fought to survive. And in the dark, brutal mathematics of survival, humanity had no equal. "We," Zekel choked out, his voice cracking. "We. Surrender." The silence that followed Zekel's surrender was absolute, save for the agonizing groan of the Time's obsidian crown's structurally compromised hull. The emergency lighting bathed the ruined bridge in a suffocating, bloody red. Sub-Prefect Zal remained huddled beneath his sparking console, his silver robes ruined, muttering calculations of probability that had long since lost any meaning. "Stand by for boarding, Volari flagship," Admiral Caldwell's voice crackled. "Any sudden power spikes, any deployment of internal defense turrets, and we will turn your bridge into a vacuum." "Acknowledge." "Acknowledged," Zekel whispered, his vocal cords feeling like sandpaper. He disabled the primary command locks, transferring the ship's internal schematics to the open human frequency. They didn't have to wait long. Less than 20 minutes later, the dull, rhythmic thud of magnetic clamps locking onto the outer hull reverberated through the deck plating. The Volari crew, those who had survived the kinetic whiplash, stood paralyzed as the sound of industrial cutting torches began to hiss against the reinforced titanium of the primary airlock. To the Volari, boarding actions were conducted via teleportation matrices or elegant phased energy breaching portals. The humans, true to their brutalist nature, were simply melting their way through the door. With a deafening Times crack, the heavy airlock doors were blown inward by directional explosives. A cloud of thick, gray smoke billowed into the antechamber, followed immediately by the heavy, synchronized stomping of magnetic boots. Through the smoke emerged a squad of Terran Coalition Marines. They did not look like soldiers. They looked like walking tanks. Clad in bulky, pressurized zero-G combat armor, their suits were heavily scarred and painted in matte, radar-absorbent black. Across their chest plates, stark white stenciling bore the insignias of their corporate manufacturers: General Dynamics, Boston Dynamics, and Times Oshkosh Defense. They wielded massive, drum-fed kinetic rifles that looked as heavy as a Volari scout pod. The Marines fanned out with terrifying silent efficiency, aiming their weapons at the surviving bridge crew. A laser sight painted a small red dot directly on the center of Zakal's forehead. Behind the heavily armored vanguard stepped a man in a much lighter, slate-gray uniform. He carried no weapon, and his environmental helmet was retracted, revealing a weathered face lined with exhaustion and a shock of graying hair. He walked with a slight limp, his eyes scanning the ruined majesty of the Volari Bridge with a cold, analytical detachment. "Admiral Richard Caldwell," the man said, his voice matching the unyielding tone from the radio. He stopped a few paces from Zekel, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked at the Supreme Commander not as an equal, but as a nuisance that had finally been dealt with. "You must be Zekel. You're taller than I expected." Zekel drew himself up to his full height, attempting to salvage a fraction of his shattered dignity. "You are barbarians. You fight with debris and nuclear fire. You have ruined 3,000 ships of the Ascendancy. The High Council will burn your world to ash for this." Caldwell let out a dry, humorless chuckle. He stepped closer, entirely unfazed by the towering alien. "Your High Council is located in the Sirius sector, approximately 8.6 light-years from here. By the time your distress signal reaches them, I'll have been retired for a decade, but that's not why I'm laughing, Commander." Caldwell gestured to a heavily armored Marine standing to his left. "Captain Bennett, pull up the tactical feed for our guest." Captain Bennett tapped a command on her wrist gauntlet, and a rugged holographic projector clattered onto the deck, projecting a grainy, green-tinted map of the Jovian space. It showed the crippled remnants of the Volari fleet drifting aimlessly. "You see, Zakal," Caldwell said, his tone dropping to a dangerous whisper, "you're right about one thing. We are barbarians, but we are also pragmatists. You assumed we turned the entire asteroid belt into a staggered array of relativistic railguns. You assumed we had a defense grid capable of annihilating your fleet 10 times over." Zakal frowned, his 4 amber eyes narrowing. "I saw the impacts. I saw my vanguard vaporized." "You saw exactly what we wanted you to see," Caldwell corrected, leaning in. "Do you know how much energy it takes to accelerate a 10-ton tungsten rod to 12% the speed of light? It requires the total energy output of a medium-sized nation for an entire month. We didn't build thousands of those guns, Zekel. We built 12. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Zal, overhearing the conversation, looked up from his console, his face draining of its pale color. 12? Zakal breathed. 12, Caldwell confirmed. We fired every single one of them in the first volley. The rest? The Kessler syndrome trap? That was just us detonating pre-placed tactical nukes in the debris field we just created. We used your own armor against you because we didn't have enough ammunition to finish the job." Zekal's mind reeled. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the human strategy crashed down upon him. The humans hadn't overpowered the Volari Ascendancy. They had outplayed them. "You were out of ammunition," Zakal said, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and profound horror. "When I surrendered, you were empty." "We were running on fumes," Caldwell admitted with a predatory grin. "If you had ordered your surviving ships to disperse and advance, we would have been forced to throw rocks at you manually. But you didn't. Because you are an apex predator, Zakal. And apex predators don't know how to act when they get punched in the mouth. You panicked. You saw math you didn't understand, and you folded." Zakal looked around the bridge. He had surrendered 3,000 invincible warships, his entire legacy, his life, to a bluff. A spectacular, apocalyptic poker game in which humanity had gone all in with a pair of twos, and the Volari had folded a royal flush out of sheer terror. "Why are you telling me this?" Zakal asked, his pride finally snapping under the weight of the humiliation. "To gloat? To revel in your primitive cunning?" "No," Caldwell said, his smile vanishing, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "I'm telling you this because we are about to negotiate your terms of surrender, and I want you to fully understand the position you are in. You aren't negotiating with a superior military force. You're negotiating with a species that has absolutely nothing to lose and is crazy enough to do times that Caldwell pointed to the holographic wreckage. Now, let's talk about dark matter. The negotiations did not take place in a grand diplomatic hall, but right there on the slanted, sparking deck of the Time's obsidian crown. Admiral Caldwell had a folding titanium table brought over from a boarding pod, setting it up amidst the debris and dried Volari coolant. "Here is what is going to happen, Commander," Caldwell began, tossing a thick, physical paper dossier onto the table. "You currently have roughly 800 ships that are severely damaged but not entirely destroyed. The rest of your fleet is scrap metal. You will order those surviving ships to power down their weapons permanently." Zekel stared at the paper, a medium he had only read about in historical archives. "And if I refuse?" "If you refuse, Captain Bennett puts a high-explosive, depleted uranium round through your cranial ridge, and I make the same offer to your sub-prefect," Caldwell said, not missing a beat. "We keep going down the chain of command until someone decides they want to live." Zal visibly flinched at the mention of his title, shrinking further back against the bulkhead. "You cannot hold an Ascendancy Vanguard hostage," Zekel argued, though the fight had completely left him. "Even if you execute us, the automated Deadman protocols will send a tight beam transmission to the High Council. They will know we fell here. They will send the main fleet. 10,000 ships, 100,000. You cannot bluff them all." "Ah, but that's the beauty of our arrangement," Caldwell replied, leaning his hands on the table. "You're going to send that transmission yourself, but you are not going to tell them you were defeated by humans." Caldwell opened the dossier, revealing a series of complex astronomical charts and gravitational readouts. "You dropped out of hyperspace, dangerously close to Jupiter's immense magnetosphere. Our data suggests that the interference caused a cascading failure in your dark energy drives. It was a tragic, unforeseen navigational anomaly, a spatial storm of unprecedented magnitude. Your fleet was torn apart by gravitational shear." Zakal stared at Caldwell in disbelief. "You want me to lie to the High Council? You want me to tell them the greatest armada ever assembled was destroyed by bad weather?" "Exactly," Caldwell nodded. "You will tell them that Sector 7G is a localized dead zone for dark matter tech, highly unstable, completely useless for conquest. You will recommend that the Sol system be quarantined permanently. And in exchange for this treason? In exchange, we let you and your surviving 800 ships limp back home. You keep your life, and you keep a fraction of your dignity. You can spin the story however you want. Say you heroically saved a portion of the fleet from the anomaly." Caldwell's eyes locked onto Zekel's, sharp and unforgiving. "But the wreckage stays here. All 2,200 destroyed dreadnoughts. The intact dark matter cores, the deflector shield generators, the subspace communication arrays. All of it becomes the property of the Terran Coalition." Zekal's breath hitched. Suddenly, the true scope of humanity's plan revealed itself. This wasn't just about survival. This was a heist. For a century, humanity had been trapped in their own solar system, limited by their crude spatial folding drives. They were isolated, primitive, and technologically stagnant compared to the rest of the galaxy. But now? Now they had a graveyard of 3,000 advanced alien warships floating in their backyard. "You intend to reverse engineer our technology," Zakal whispered, a cold terror gripping his primary hearts. "We've got the best engineers from Lockheed, Boeing, and SpaceX already warming up their tools," Caldwell said, offering a grim smile. "You, Volari, have spent 2,000 years stagnating because you had no rivals. You think your tech is magic. We think it's just physics we haven't broken down into a patent yet. Give us 5 years with your engines, Zakal. 10 tops." Zekel imagined it. Human aggression, human unpredictability, human spite armed with Volari dark matter lances and kinetic displacement shields. He imagined human dreadnoughts, painted in that terrifying, radar-absorbent black, dropping out of hyperspace over the Volari homeworld. "You are a plague," Zekal said softly. "We're survivors," Caldwell corrected, tapping the paper dossier. "Sign the confession, Commander. Tell your council to stay away, because if they come back, we won't be using rocks next time." Zekel's hands trembled as he picked up the crude human writing implement Caldwell offered. He looked at Zal, who offered no objection, only a silent plea for survival. He looked out the viewport at the ruined husks of his fleet, the debris catching the distant light of the yellow sun. With a heavy heart, Zekel signed his name, Hours later, the surviving Volari ship slowly limped away from the Jovian gravity well. Their engines sputtered and flickered, crippled and humiliated. Zekel stood on his ruined bridge, watching the small blue orb of Earth slowly shrink into the distance. He had arrived as a conqueror, an apex predator ready to crush an insect. He left as a messenger, carrying a terrifying truth back to the stars. On the bridge of the Times UNS Thermopylae, Admiral Caldwell watched the Volari sensor ghosts vanish from his tactical display. The tension that had held his shoulders rigidly in place for the past 12 hours finally dissolved. He let out a long, slow breath, slumping slightly into his command chair. "They're gone, Admiral," Captain Bennett reported from the comms station. "Translation signatures confirmed. They've left the system." "Good," Caldwell muttered, rubbing his eyes. "Send a tight beam to Earth Command. Tell them Operation Vanguard was a success. And tell the salvage crews to get to work." "Yes, sir," Bennett said, pausing for a moment, looking out at the massive field of alien wreckage that now orbited Jupiter like a glittering metallic ring. "Sir, do you think they bought it? The spatial anomaly story?" "It doesn't matter if they bought it," Caldwell said, a genuine smile finally breaking across his weathered face. "It only has to buy us time. We were a species holding a knife in a gunfight. They just handed us an entire armory." Caldwell looked out into the deep black void of space. He knew the Volari would return one day. The High Council would eventually see through the lie, or their pride would demand retribution. But when they did return, humanity would not be waiting with cleverly disguised asteroids and desperate bluffs. They would be waiting as equals. They would be waiting as apex predators. "Let them come," Caldwell whispered to the stars. If you loved this deep dive into the resilient, unapologetically brilliant, and fiercely defiant spirit of humanity in the face of impossible odds, drop a like. What would you have done in Admiral Caldwell's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this sci-fi HFY drama with your friends, and hit that subscribe button with the notification bell turned on so you never miss another epic story from the stars.
Hi, my name is Tran Trung, the owner and manager of Palace Truths. After watching the video, "Humans Don't Scare Me," the Supreme Commander said, then every warning alarm went off, HFY, I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the growing sense of tension as confidence slowly turned into disbelief. This story isn't just about power. It's about how determination, creativity, and careful planning can overcome an opponent who believes they're untouchable. That's one of the reasons I enjoy HFY stories so much. Was there a moment that surprised you the most, or a character whose decisions stood out to you? Do you think the biggest advantage in a difficult situation is strength, intelligence, or the ability to stay calm under pressure? One small lesson I took away is to never underestimate people based on first impressions. In everyday life, keeping an open mind and preparing well often goes further than confidence alone. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy HFY stories like this, feel free to like the video or subscribe for more adventures with us.